Okay, thank you for coming back to this very interesting arena. We just had an interesting episode with technology intruding on the process in a way that we will need to integrate somehow going forward. I was going to start with something that I had written down, but it changed when I had a dream last night. And the dream says everything I wanted to say in a different way. In the dream, I had a script. I was going to be on a TV show and I had a script. And all I had to do was read the script. It was well composed. I liked it and I was looking forward to it. But I lost the piece of paper. And it was a couple of minutes before the show was to go on. And I didn't have the paper. And half of me was scrambling to find it. And the other half was trying to think about what in God's name am I going to say? Am I going to remember what I wanted to say that was so well composed? Could I be spontaneous and communicate without looking ridiculous? Now, in thinking about it during the morning, I thought about a couple of things. My performance anxiety is fine. That's for the analyst of long ago. But I thought of it as being a representative of something. Because in emails, we talked about this being a homeland, a country of sorts that's forming. And this is, I think, the 10th meeting. People have come and gone in this arena, and all of them have left for the same reason, at least the surface reason. We don't know the individual dynamics, we're not supposed to, but they all say the same thing. The public arena is too scary. Being ourselves without a script in the public arena they were not comfortable with it. And they all said the same thing. So I found myself thinking about the word representative as something that doesn't come up in the individual analytic theory or technique very much, but that we should think about, that we will, I think, be ourselves, but also be representatives of other groups. For example, Jack, you are the man, whether you like it or not. And I'm just sort of thinking out loud about that dynamic. And we were going to talk about our country, July 4th, the 250th anniversary, where we are as a country, what it means to be patriotic. I forget what else, but somebody else take it from here.
One of the things that we were concerned about was, I think Luba had mentioned this at one point, the individual versus the collective or the group, and how that fits into what we're doing. I mean, we're participating as individuals, but now you're saying as representatives. That sort of fits into Luba's comment earlier about participating as a member of a group. I mean, we represent a different group of, each of us represents a different group, so to speak.
Well, I think I was concerned mostly about um, how to how to maintain and kind of protect the group, this group, that even as each one of us, comes from our own lives and from our own places of belonging, but to the extent to which we kind of share one place of belonging, which is psychoanalysis, and which is what we try to put at our disposal here. But that is what brought us together to become this group, and um, how to think of this group as important, um, for the purposes of the public at large, for the sake of the public at large, how to attend to it and how to protect it. So I think that's what, sort of going back maybe to the concept of this being a little bit of a homeland, a little bit of a country of our own.
Yeah, I like that formulation of us being a little bit of a country of our own. And I mean, it seems to me that it's important to make the distinction that, at least from my perspective, people left because they didn't want to be associated with some of the ideas espoused in this group.
I don't know if that was the case. I think it was also self-protection. I don't know. I mean, it's possible that they're not here to share that.
I mean, I think to some degree, we're all sort of objects for each other's projections because we only see parts of each other. But the fact is that the group is a container to some degree that allows us to sort of go a little deeper. But with the public gaze, there's no capacity to go deeper. It's fixed in time, the impressions. And so I feel like that's one of the vulnerabilities, that there's just a caricature that has no, like a text versus a conversation. And in some ways, everybody's misunderstood to some degree. That's a kind of common thing. So how to be understood takes time and patience and the capacity to hold complexity.
One of the things I hope we can illustrate over time is that ability to hold opposites, to be able to say, I disagree with you about this, or this perspective makes me uncomfortable, or something, but also be able to listen and not do this instant cancel culture thing that's surrounds us. But it's hard. And when you have a third dimension, people who are going to be watching and criticizing or projecting or identifying with one or another. That's what I've heard most from people who left is not so much uncomfortable with what other people were saying, but uncomfortable with what they might say and how they might be heard.
Yeah, I think that there's that component too. I guess I'm thinking, one of the themes early on, that one of the members who joined us briefly did not like the idea of the US as a Christian nation. I just remember that was kind of one of the, I don't know, I suppose disagreements, right? And I think to follow up on my idea a little bit, I mean, I think it is complex. I think it's multifaceted, but the not wanting to be associated with a group in which certain ideas are being espoused, well, then it seems to me that belonging to an institute, and I suppose having the goodwill and respect of the institute members is more important than engaging with the complexity or trying to hold the complexity of multiple views, multifaceted views.
And I remember, Michelle, you and Katrina both early on shared the fact that you're kind of outsiders in your institutes, sharing a little bit of a different perspective. So that seems very relevant.
Relevant in what way?
Well, just the sort of the desire to belong, but at the same time to hold one's autonomy, the same question you were having about the individual and the group. So in this group, it feels like we have the capacity to hold some differences that maybe our institutes don't, or the country has difficulty with. And I've sort of done this little exercise in my mind, trying to place everybody in our group in some kind of spectrum around whatever, I mean, whatever topic. And there's a kind of vagueness and ambiguity, which feels good. I mean, initially, I think I had a stronger sense of where everybody is. And I think over time, I've developed much more capacity to see the kind of grayness of sort of not really knowing where everybody is because everyone is open to some degree.
I think this dialectic of belonging and autonomy is really important. And maybe where each of us kind of falls on that, that, if autonomy is important, if the search for truth is sort of paramount, right, that one might be willing to give up some degree of belonging. But if belonging is more important, then I can see how, ideas that don't fit in with one's worldview would be threatening, or with an institute's worldview would be threatening.
There are, personal unconscious threats, and then there are real threats. We would be excluded from the Institute if you didn't have the right dynamic, if you didn't believe what they believed. It was, you knew that if you didn't twist your brain into the right kind of pretzel to be true to yourself and true to them, that you were gone. So, threats are real.
Yeah, what does that say about the institutes, though? Right, that the range of acceptable beliefs is really quite narrow.
It is.
Mhm.
There is also the option of leaving, isn't there? I guess I speak from my own experience because I left my institute. I disagreed with their policies and the way they were conducting their governance there, and I left. I mean, there are other places, there are other institutes. It's possible to leave. So and I think there are also well, maybe in some locations that's not the case and there are fewer choices. But there's also a hierarchy of belonging. I mean, we all want to belong in many places or several places. And then there is a hierarchy, which matters the most, ultimately. What kind of belonging where matters more than some other kind of belonging. And then Katrina, you mentioned, you know, a sort of espousal of a certain kind of an outlook, a kind of an ideology that becomes, to some more important than physical belonging in a particular group, because of attachment to a certain kind of an idea. Um, the truth that you speak about, the kind of truth that one holds, or tries to hold.
Mhm.
I find myself thinking about my religion, my country, and my institute in the same kind of trajectory over time. That it started out very orthodox. We were a white Christian country. We were, the Freudian believers. And then differences happened. At first it was, Jung and Klein and Lacan and now it's everybody. It's the nurse practitioners and the social workers and the Black people and the white people and in some ways it feels good, and in other ways it feels problematic. And I'm not sure that I can be more specific about that, but that we lose something in exchange for something else. I mean, I can be Catholic without being Catholic, which I can be Freudian without being Freudian. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
Hmm.
I can be American without feeling, like my country right or wrong.
Well, maybe thinking about that and um, sort of America and Americanism and the 250th and who's an American. I guess the idea I've sort of been turning over in my mind is that maybe the multicultural, multi-faith project is over. Maybe it was never sustainable to begin with, because, like you said, Alice, to be Catholic without being Catholic, or it's just it's too fragmenting. It's ultimately at the end of the day, like, what do these words mean? It ends up meaning nothing. And I think people are feeling that. They're feeling that kind of anxiety that the postmodern, the words are not um, related to kind of physical things in the real world, physical manifestations, right? The signifiers are just these kind of empty floating, yeah, again, words, they don't actually refer to a signified. And I think people are feeling that. I think they're feeling that kind of anxiety. And as a result, I think we're seeing increased tribalism, even in the institutes, that people will choose the tribe of the institute rather than engage in this kind of project of complexity. I hope that made sense. It was sort of, maybe it was a kind of thoughts were, yeah, trying to put that into words. It wasn't planned. Maybe like your dream. I didn't have my notes.
But but are you saying that if the project of multiculturalism is over and the alternative is just single, like one tribe, is that kind of what you're saying, that the defense against the complexity and the disturbance and the anxiety around this complexity is a refuge into a sort of a singular tribal focus?
No, I'm actually not saying. I think it's very fragmented right now, that people are
Mhm.
choosing their tribe,
Mhm.
whatever that might be. But that means there's no national identity. You can't have a country that's so fragmented that, it's like you take a glass bottle and just throw it against the wall, and you have all these shards, and you can't put that back together into a bottle, right? Into a whole object. I think in a way that's where we are, and maybe something new will emerge from that kind of fragmentation. Maybe it's too early to tell what, um, but that's kind of I think that's where we are right now.
Well, it sort of takes me back to sort of your original thought about it being a Christian country, as if somehow that would help in the sort of a common definition. And I guess the implications of that is people who feeling left out, what happens to them under that construct. And it's a new, I mean, I'm just curious about the implications of how this manifests in terms of who has power and where one fits in. Just like in an institute, if an institute decides this is our theory, because the complexity of theory makes everybody confused about what an analysis is, then what happens to all the other theories? And is there something about the diversity? I mean, this whole fight in the military around, diversity is the worst thing that could happen. In fact, all the research shows that diversity actually helps functioning teams, even though it's more complex initially. So again, I understand the anxiety around this complexity. I feel it as well, but I don't quite know where to go with that.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, maybe a quick point to your question. Yeah, I do think that the US should be a majority Christian country, and the identity should be as a Christian nation. But I think that, you know, ideal, that formulation is actually most likely to have tolerance for religious minorities. As long as, yeah, you have some small percentage of atheists or, Hindus but I think a majority Christian nation is I think it's our best bet.
The Christians don't even agree about what's Christian. There's a
Yeah,
lot of complexity in that community. So you don't
I
solve the
completely agree.
problem.
I agree entirely. Yeah, I mean, Alice might get this, but I'm just going to say the Reformation was a disaster for the human race.
I mean, the human's complexity to split off is pretty limitless.
Yeah, yeah, I entirely agree, Jack. Yeah.
Well, I took Luba's book recommendation of several sessions back. I took up that recommendation and I ordered Albion Seed, which was the history of the different groups of British folks who came over to the US. And they came from different parts of Britain and from different cultures within Great Britain. And they each brought kind of like a different way of living, a different set of beliefs, a different kind of cultural background. And I turned exactly to the part that is my background, my cultural background, which is the southeastern United States, the backcountry, the southern highlands in the U.S. And those folks, according to the historian who wrote Albion Seed, were the people who were, he called them borderers or border people. They were at the border of Scotland and England, or maybe at the border of the Irish Sea on the Irish side, the border of the Irish Sea on the Scottish side. And these folks tended to be, especially the people on the northern English counties and the southern Scottish counties, they were literally at war with each other for over 1,000 years. They were fighting over these little small bits of land that, they were each trying to claim. And they developed a kind of warrior culture, according to this historian. And then when they came here to the U.S., they moved into the Southeast, the Carolinas, Tennessee, and then on west, Arkansas and Georgia, Texas eventually, and so on. They kept many parts of that culture, that warrior culture. They were real quick to get mad. They fought when they were mad. They didn't want to make peace too easily. They were pretty stubborn folks. And as I was reading this particular chapter, it's a long chapter about this group of people, I thought, oh, these are my people. I mean, they really are my people. I know them. I got family members like that. I'm surrounded by communities like that. I knew these people in high school, and it's real interesting because when I said that to myself as I was reading this, these are my people, instead of feeling that fight against them, which has been my life's project, I felt like, oh, there's a certain personality here. There's a certain set of values here, many of which are great values, courage and liveliness and family connectedness and so on. And I felt differently toward that group of people than I have really ever in my life. I've been in Tennessee doing battle with Tennessee, for a long time. I mean, I've lived a few other places, but mostly in Tennessee and Kentucky. And I think that accepting the fact that, hey, this is a part of me too, has been just an extremely valuable experience that I've just had, thanks to this book, and also thanks to the discussions around diversity in this group. As Jack says, we've been maybe less forthright in claiming our beliefs and so on because we've been working together in a group, trying to work together in a group. But I think that has also softened my perspective in a way that's been very important to me.
I keep going back to the idea of in-group and out-group. And, as time goes on and there's more and more chaos, I have heard many, like even with my own Jewish group, I've heard many different voices that I haven't heard before. Obviously, this is a very upsetting time, but we're hearing more. And so I think it's going to take a lot to hold all that complexity.
And this country is unlike any other. This country is complexity. And it's even starting, as Lynn was saying, about the British settlers who weren't homogenous in themselves, but had different tribes in them. And that's just one seed, the British seed. What about all the other seeds from all other places in the world? Uh, Yesterday, I happened to take an Uber, um, and I met the driver. Turned out to be somebody who was born in Eritrea. Eritrea, my God! And that was in Midwest. I've lived all of my life in America in New York. I never met anybody from Eritrea, and here and there he was, and it was fascinating to meet somebody who brought another piece of the world, another a different piece of the world, into the Midwest of America, and very much somebody who lives now in his, new location and very interested and very engaged and has a knowledge and point of view about where he is now. But this was fascinating, and just a tiny, tiny, minuscule example of all else. And, I mean, that's the identity of this country. And I remember a long time ago trying to read de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. And I remember two things that stayed with me somehow. One of them was his observation how busy people were here. I realized that that's where the word businessman came from. It wasn't just businessmen as businessmen. It was the fact that people were busy here. They came here from all over the place, and they got busy here to create that which became the country. This was one thing. The other thing that he observed was speaking of church, speaking of religion, he spoke about how churches became places of organized life. So in other words, you're coming to this country, um, you know, that is unknown, that is wild, that is to be explored and to be inhabited. And that the way to do that was to, in addition to getting very busy, is to get organized communities around churches. So the question of religion, I think it wasn't just the creed. I mean, the creed in itself, I'm sure it's a powerful thing, but it also the function of it. It provided a function for organizing, um, especially early America, which, well, Katrina says now we need that again. I'm not so sure that this is what we need. I think it had taken root in this country, because coming to the new land and having to survive here and having to make a life here and make a place of belonging, I think faith and religion were incredibly important in that. I don't know that it needs to be now, but different people have different feelings about it, and different need of it.
Yes, but I also think the loss of the sacred is something that has had a big impact on all of us. If nothing is sacred, then what do we have to hold on to?
How about treatment of each other? That's sacred.
It is, but I don't know if you can pass it down to your children so quickly.
My God, if not that, then what?
Well, because there are a lot of problems in families. A part of a lot, when you have the loss of religion and loss of structure, there's a lot that has, happened with the family, just the family unit. I'm not saying that religion is the answer, and religion has a lot of its own warts. I don't know what the answer is. But belonging, the whole idea of not belonging, people are very lonely today.
Luba, I really appreciate your thoughts. If not religion, what do you think we do need?
Love of nature, love of the world, love of the fact that nature is organized a certain way and that we are part of that organization, and that we are organized according to the organization of nature. Whether that involves higher powers is a matter of choice, I imagine. I'm a Spinozan. So to me, that's that question is sort of, it's Deus sive natura, uh, if you need God for that, then God is what matters, by all means. But it's nature, and nature is organized in such a way as to um, have certain laws and certain rules, and abiding by them or paying attention to them. I guess that brings it the question of ethics.
When you talk about nature, it makes me think about the fact that our species is brilliant in science and technology. We can fly to Mars. I can talk to you. Yeah, the glitches, but we can do this. Cancer is now it's no longer a death sentence. It's a treatable disease. We've done, when the data doesn't fit, scientists will jump on it, get a new paradigm, test it out, and make something better. We don't do that in the human arenas. If you're a Jew and you're a Christian and you're a Hindu and you're an atheist, like, you do you. But where's truth? Where's the elephant if we're all blind men? And I think we're either looking for something or we're not, because you can't find it and it's not my thing to go look for that. But it just strikes me that we're so primitive in psychological problem solving and so brilliant in the other kind of problem solving that we're going to use our brilliant nukes to kill each other. I don't know. I want to find God.
Yeah, that's profound, Alice. I resonate with that, with finding God. I mean, without God, there is no objective reality.
Yeah.
There's no science without God.
I'm not sure I understand that. What do you mean there's no science without God?
That science presupposes an objective reality that can be discovered, that can be known, that there is a creator who organized the universe, our planet, according to certain laws. If there is no God, then there is no truth with a capital T. There's no final objective truth. And indeed we're living through that transition right now, I think, where people say my truth, your truth, who can really know? Um, I think it's all related to the loss of faith in God. And and then the sort of the other tidbit that science came out of the monasteries. I mean, it was the monks keeping the flame of knowledge alive all through the Dark Ages, all through the barbaric Dark Ages and the scientific revolution, the flourishing, it all came out of the monasteries. It came from men of faith.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's interesting. It makes me imagine this sort of life in monasteries, that was shielded from the vagaries of life and having to make a living and having to survive and so having time to reflect and think and be curious and consider consider making observations and consider. I mean, that's yes, that's actually that's great and wonderful. And philosophers did the same thing. They had the same kind of I suppose, whatever opportunity to create that place of reflection. And so, yeah, so definitely science is is something that is a discovery of the laws of nature. That's basically what science is. If we're finding cures for cancer, it's because they exist in nature, and it's a matter of the brilliant scientific minds to find it. That doesn't say, that for you presupposes God, or maybe for Alice. It doesn't for me. It presupposes the fact that there is an organization in nature. How it's created, that's, I'm kind of agnostic about it. So,
No, it's interesting though, when the Constitution was written, I've been reading a lot of American history,
Mm.
and people have problems. Like, people don't get along with each other. People don't aren't so good. And so that's why we do need laws. We need some kind of a hierarchy to hold things. And I think this has been the biggest debate. It's between, well, what kind of hierarchy are we having? Is it a God-based hierarchy? Is it government? What is it? But things feel very unheld and very unstable right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree, Michelle. And I liked your point earlier about the loss of the sacred. I think that they feel so unheld and so unstable precisely because of the loss of the sacred.
Mhm. I do think it's a war about Western civilization.
Mhm.
If you go really deep in this, will Western civilization survive or not?
By Western civilization, how do you define that?
Well, some of it is hierarchy, reading classics, religion, systems of government, organizations. I think that all of that is being questioned. I mean, look at the New York election a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Western civilization in America, or the Western civilization in Western Europe?
In the whole world,
Civilization?
everywhere, everywhere.
But what do we know about how that Western civilization functions in established countries in Western Europe as opposed to America?
And such a huge immigration such a huge influx of immigration that Europe does not look like it used to.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that, that Europe doesn't look like it used to, that there's a threat to Western civilization right now, kind of across the Western world, and that Europe in particular does seem to be in a kind of suicidal spiral. I mean, the just the UK has some crazy high abortion rate, like the number of pregnancies that end in abortion. I don't remember the exact number, so I don't want to misquote. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was a very high percentage of Britain women terminating their pregnancies and not giving birth to the next generation, right? There's that. And then the rise of euthanasia, the UK again, in Canada through the MAID program, that there is this kind of, yeah, suicidal spiral. So in a way, I was thinking about this, around July 4th and the 250th, that America is actually in a better place. We have our problems, but it's kind of sometimes looking around and seeing people's decorations and kind of there's more of a will to live, more of a will to build, to succeed. Maybe it's that busyness that Luba was referencing, right? That there's a more of a zest for life, it seems to me, in the US than what's happening across Europe.
So just to check about truth, I just Googled, does Britain have a high abortion rate? And the answer was it doesn't have one compared to general statistics. So then the question is, how do we trust what we know?
We can't. That's the problem. We
Mhm.
can't trust anything. I can't trust anything
Mhm.
I hear.
Yeah, no reality anymore.
So horrible.
Which is really disturbing that, so we launch on this assumption that this is happening based on information that's increasingly becoming unreliable.
Yeah.
And we kill people based on that information, and we do terrible things to them based on that information. The idea that immigrants are a violent population in the US, and based on that, we're torturing them in lock-up prisons based on information that's not correct.
We don't understand even what they're saying about what's going on, if what's correct, what's not. We don't know. We are living with such ignorance of what's happening around us. So how do we intelligently make sense of this?
Right. And is there a fantasy that somehow God will have the answer to that? But then the question is, how do you know it's God you're talking to? I mean, there's a credibility question of even about that, as far as my perspective.
I feel sorry for God. That's how I feel. I feel, boy, if God created the world and this is your creation and this is what's going on, it's very sad.
My image of God is a sixth grader doing a science experiment.
Mhm.
Well, God has been here before, to your point, Michelle. Hopefully he doesn't flood it again.
I'm sorry for God. I really do. I kind of feel for God.
Well, wait a second. But God is also somebody who, who gets preyed on by a football player hitting a goal, or whatever, whatever that expression is. Uh, so God is very, very, very busy, and for many, many people that God exists in their pockets. They can take him out in time of need to pray for some particular kind of a thing to happen. So, that's a very busy institution, God. But in terms of what can be known, in the question of Western civilization, I think what can be known about this country is that it is a country of becoming. This is how it was founded. This is how it exists. This is what it is. And in that regard, it's a very different country than any other country in the world. And the Western civilization in Western Europe, I mean, those are established cultures. Yes, they're dealing with immigration, but they're dealing with it in a very different, they must be in a very different way because they have established history, established way of being. That's this place is and cannot be otherwise. I mean, people try to kind of sort of surround it with the wall and make it into a closed place, but that's not its identity. I think that's a truth that we can know about this country.
Well, I don't disagree with that at all, Luba, but maybe it works if newcomers assimilate to the American way of life rather than impose their own ideas from their own countries. I mean, of course, that always happens to some extent, but I think the US works, America works when assimilation is the name of the game.
But they need to bring also, of course, they need to become part of the whole, but they also are bringing, they're also reinventing it and they are re-energizing it and they're sort of expanding the genetic pool like a good family does in general, right? Every family. So, it just complete 100% assimilation, that's stagnation.
Well, there's assimilation about how people would come over and they had nothing and they would make something for themselves and they would, be part of, I guess, a westernized society. I mean, you have communities where, you're seeing, at least in Europe, you're seeing Sharia law.
Mhm.
That's frightening. That's a very frightening. That is not assimilate. I don't think assimilation is being, you could have your own community. And I think it starts with small communities and respect for each other and building up some sense of community. We have really lost a large sense of community, not just with our institutes, but in our life. And what I have realized is that you start talking to people, it's not as divisive as it's made up in terms of what the media does. People are much more reasonable than they get made out to be. And I think that there is something horrible that is about dividing us up and creating all of these problems amongst each other. And there isn't enough goodwill to be able to find a way to live amongst each other with our differences.
From an analytic perspective, we're doing it wrong. If we want to, assimilate psychologically, you have to invite the person in. What we do is everything you say, if I don't like it, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're an anti-Semite, you're a homophobic. And it puts, the idea is that if you change to think like I do, then maybe I'll accept you. But we're not going to listen. And we're not expecting each other to listen. It's like okay to throw those labels at each other. And it just seems like we invite them in and push them away. So it's funny, I think of this group just now, the idea came to mind as sort of finding God, in the sense of finding an overarching model that would allow us to be comfortable with our differences, but stay as a country, as a community where we can give and receive. And that's something that if you believe in God, maybe God wants us to do. And if you don't, maybe it's just an analytic or political paradigm that can be useful.
I feel like it's more from my perspective, it's more a natural systems model that I sort of connect with you, Luba, about it, that God implies there's some fixed force as opposed that there's a natural phenomenon of systems working together and getting into turbulence and dealing with diversity and crashing and coming together again. That's to me what spirituality is about. That's what the sacred is about, understanding that we're part of a natural system and trying to harmonize with that and understand how it works. That for me that's my spiritual practice. And it involves kindness. It also involves acknowledging the fact that I'm threatened by people who are different, that I have to push back on that, but I have to understand that that's the reality. Just like the country needs to understand that it has a dark side and a light side, and
Exactly.
to go to one extreme is very problematic.
Yes. It's all projection. There is no ability to take something in that's uncomfortable and be curious about it.
Right.
We run from things
That's right.
rather than really run toward understanding and being curious about painful stuff. That's what makes life interesting.
And it feels like the question of group assimilation into the dominant culture is just a parallel to the individual assimilation into the need to belong to a group. It's just way more complex because you have this identity, you have a shared identity with your cultural community, but you want to fit into the other community, and people who make the crossover can be seen as traitors to their culture, and the culture gives something up by assimilating. And initially, it's hated by the dominant culture or resisted. That's the tradition of America.
Mm-hmm. Well, America was built to be understanding of people's desire to be religious or not, or different. There was a lot of people came here for religious freedom.
Unless you were Native American,
Religion.
unless you lived here already.
Unless you lived here already.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about, so I had this book on a bookshelf in my house, and I was really trying to find it. I looked for 2 days. I never could find it. And the book was, I think, from the 1970s. And the name of the book was Theory and Praxis. And the reason I was looking for it is that I was trying to put the pieces together in my own mind. Like, do I come from lived experience? Do I come from the world? Did I come into a world that was already there, déjà vu, and I joined it? And I joined the culture of the Southern Highlands. I didn't mean to. That's where my parents put me, That's where they were from.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot that is given when you come from a place. You just pick it up and carry it. It comes with you. And then there's what is chosen. And for me, what I have tried to choose in my life is, I agree with Jack a lot. I want to be welcoming to people. I want to be kind. I want to understand where other folks are coming from. And I think that trying to put theory and practice together for myself was one of the things that really drew me to the psychodynamic perspective, because I could see how I could understand another person if I listened to them and kind of got where they were coming from, quote unquote. And then I could put that in a perspective that allowed me to see them in a light that didn't make them monsters, even if some of the behaviors they were coming to therapy for was, pretty negative stuff. In fact, it often usually was, in fact. And so putting that together, and what I loved about things I was reading in psychodynamic textbooks and so on, was often it was, how do you do this work? It was books on praxis. How do you do this? How do you enhance your empathy? How do you listen with the third ear? How do you hear what the person is saying and empathize, and yet at the same time not defensively react, although sometimes, of course, we do, as Alice mentioned, countertransference issues and so on. But I feel like psychodynamic thinking really is a wonderful way of combining different parts of our brain, the parts of our brain that are feeling and instinctual and also tribal, and the parts of our brain that are able to appreciate with awe the sacred or the spiritual or another level of seeing that, is really important to me. And I guess that's one thing that really drew me to psychodynamic work, whether it was with a single person or whether it was trying to understand large group dynamics, like with, Vamek, Vonek.
It's another problem with our aging country, or I don't know if the country is the right word, but it seems to be we're losing that in depth and complexity of understanding of ourselves and others. I mean, I'm considered a behavioral health provider.
Yeah.
Come on. That's what I have to label myself on a drop-down menu. And, it's cognitive behavioral therapy and it's medication management.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 10 sessions or less, or you're going to get audited. And we don't ask ourselves, we don't think in multi-layered, looking for unconscious forces and defenses, and am I rejecting this person because they remind me of a part of myself that I'm afraid of? But those questions should be a part of our language, and they're not. And that's another place where I think God needs to be found, because that would bring us all together.
Mm-hmm.
If we could start to ask those questions. And that's where our field should be front and center, but it's not. For some reason, psychoanalysis is not leading the way.
No, it isn't.
I don't know why, but we're struggling within ourselves to address these issues, but we're not doing it very well.
We're in a world that doesn't respect process.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. It's like the digital world. Where our thinking is becoming digital.
Well, that's part of what we started today with technology.
That's right.
And technology has no friction.
Yeah.
So you get everything instantly, but it doesn't have the whole process of how you get. And that is what makes us human.
Yeah.
And it's missing. And so you have, stories about the journey. We don't hear that.
Yeah. Even novels, kids aren't reading anymore.
No.
The teachers I work with all say the same thing. They can't assign a novel.
Yeah. there are big problems in education now with AI. English teachers can't, they
Can't teach.
do a take home assignment.
Yeah.
So again, so you germinate, you think about something and you play with it. You can't do that if you have to do your writing in class.
Yeah. Right.
So there's a lot to think about. And to me, it is what psychoanalysis can offer, is what's so sorely needed.
Yeah.
And yet there's resistance within the psychoanalytic world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, psychoanalysis has no metaphysics, so I don't know that it's really up for the task of this present moment and into the future.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I assume that institutes, psychoanalytic institutes, still still insist that personal analysis is what is required, and which is the personal analysis, meaning for a candidate, a future analyst, to have an opportunity to encounter herself, to encounter what's inside, what's within. And that if you have that, um, then you are in a better position not to project. And then you are in a position to bring that to the work with the patients. Well, certainly there are pitfalls here and there that will come up, but nevertheless, this is then an analyst and is hopefully equipped to manage that, and then if you and then it's kind of extrapolating from there, and then thinking about thinking of the spiritual world, which I imagine is the world in which sort of is the world that is shared by all those people, um, and 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 that an analyst would be in a position to kind of receive just about anybody or everybody, have a capacity to um, so I don't know that it needs a God to do that, whether or not God exists and creates that. But I think it is something that an analyst, if they truly encounter themselves, then they are equipped to bring that into the world.
I think it's good for all of us for even if you're not an analyst, to know about what's going on in your insides.
Well, but I mean, but that's what I'm saying is that that's the premise of the analytic work. That's the premise of what analysis is for, is that by encountering yourself, then you are equipped to encounter others and encounter other people,
So why
whoever they are.
so why are institutes having such problems?
Yeah.
Maybe they're not doing sufficiently disciplined work like that, with that kind of expectation, that kind of a purpose. That is their function. That is what they're for. I happen to remember, and I actually have recently finished a memoir, and I remembered a scene from my young adulthood. I think I was a young adult in Poland. I think it was a Danish film, and in it there was a young woman was taking a bath and having a conversation with a diminutive doppelganger on the shelf. She was having a conversation with herself and sort of sorting out whatever things. I think it was a kind of a foretelling of what I was of my self-analysis that was eventually going to happen when I landed in America. Um, but that's sort of, I have that visual image of what analysis is, having your analyst help you do that.
But a lot of young people feel that the political should be part of the analysis. And so there's a very big split between older people and younger people today.
The political meaning.
Well, there are people who have left Institute. I mean, they've left APSA, they've left, other places, the IPA, because of the politics. It's a very big problem.
Well, is that the politics, or is that a sense that their identities were not being received? They were not being welcomed.
Well, if one is preaching hate and wanting to get rid of one person or one group of people, that's a tough one.
Yes.
That's a very, 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 if somebody just wants you dead, what else can you do but speak up for yourself?
Yeah, well, I guess that's Alice's project. Alice believes that psychoanalysts should be, if not psychoanalysts, then who? If not psychoanalysts that would have at disposal, something that others don't,
Yeah.
then who?
I think we need to get to a point where we can put those feelings in words and feel safe enough that we're with other humans to say that your people make me uncomfortable. Your people scare me. I don't think your people have a right to exist, and talk about it. And I don't hear any place where that's possible to do. I just hear banners being waved with, get rid of them and get rid of the other guys. It happens in APSA the same way it happens on the world stage. The Democrats and Republicans, the Middle East, we shoot each other down. But, and then the alternative is, oh, let's all be nice to each other.
Yes, exactly.
Right. There are a couple of threads in the APSA list, oh, isn't this nice? We're all being nice. There's something in between being in denial or being defensively nice and voting for somebody who's going to drop a bomb on your other people's heads. That we got to find that.
Well, looking at a little bit of that election discussion on APSA, the thing, it seems like it's only at the point of annihilation or mutually assured destruction that people are willing to have those kind of hard conversations. So maybe we're not facing the abyss quite enough to realize that this is existential. This is not just a thought.
Yeah.
Which is frightening, but maybe that's how we learn.
Yeah.
But we are living in frightening times.
Right.
And I do believe the only way to work with very frightening times is to have a sense of community and connections with people that matter, who disagree also, but some basic respect to have a conversation on all sides, from whichever side you're coming from, to understand that not everybody's going to agree with you, but they also have a right to exist, but not to kill you.
Their thoughts have a right to exist.
Yeah, not if they're killing me, but
right.
then both parties have to exist.
Right. Yeah. But I think it's people like us who are not about to kill each other who can have these difficult conversations and model it, come up with some ideas about how to do it. And I think we can educate other people to be able to stay in a room and ask the right questions. And I was picturing a classroom in the future about asking questions. Ask a question of your chatbot and then ask a question of your friend.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the similarities and differences, and what kinds of responses are you going to get? And what are you going to do with those responses? There are lots of ways we can deepen our understanding and market it. And it's not about pathology, it's about difference. We're different. The idea of America being a Christian country is a fascinating idea. I'd like to keep discussing it, but it's so charged. The Middle East is so charged. Trump and the Democrats is.
Well, I think, it seems to me that we're gradually entering a dark age. These things don't come suddenly, they're gradual. And this time it's going to be a dark age with technology, or the vestiges of technology that will survive. But, Luba said the God in our pocket, and yeah, everybody's got the God of a smartphone in their pocket, right? And now with AI, even the companies developing it, they explicitly say they're creating God. And I think everybody, to an extent, none of us are immune from propaganda, and psychoanalysts included. And so I think that there is this kind of gradual process where people are sort of, they're being played, they're being preyed upon, kind of from one cause to another, right? These couple years, you shall hate Trump. Trump equals Hitler. Then it's pro-queer, trans rights, this kind of fervor around that. Then it's pro-Palestine. For a while it was Ukraine, right? Like, and people are sort of being pulled from one cause to another, and then they adopt it fervently. And there's very little of a sense of deep thinking about it. I think the loss of deep literacy means there's a loss of interiority. And instead, people are, again, just being swayed by the God in the pocket. This is what you will think now. And then, in a few months, we'll tell you another thing to think. And again, I wish analysts were more immune from this, but they don't seem any more immune from this than the general population.
No, they're worse.
They're worse. Thank you,
Worse.
Michelle. Yeah.
I have never heard so much hate except from these listservs. And I've heard this from other people. We've all heard it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's this hubris about people who have done analytic training. And I think what it really requires is a lot of humility. To realize, once you start to understand how the mind works, you realize how little you know about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And, and there's that hubris has nothing to do with psychoanalysis. It's anti-analytic.
Yeah. I think classical analysts mastered the art of projection, because whatever anybody said to you, you learn to twist it around and make it their problem. That's how the process worked. So.
Right.
I feel like when we're under threat, the initial impulse is to go to the safe harbor. And I think to some degree, what we're talking about is resisting that and going to a less safe harbor to have the conversation. That there's more safety outside of your harbor in some ways.
Well, if you're willing to take the risk, yeah.
Right.
If you are invested in keeping an open mind, this is an investment. You know, what is that saying? A mind is a terrible thing to lose,
Waste.
club,
Yes.
waste, whatever. Uh, yeah, if that does that matter? I mean, or just getting an answer from Chat GPT.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting. My association to that mine is a terrible thing to waste was, I believe, a campaign for Black university funding,
Mhm.
It was
which is a conversation we haven't had, but it's ironic in the context of what's happening right now. And losing mind, the slip to losing mind. In fact, we're all losing our minds. We've gone to wasting the mind to losing the mind.
And I find, like even to have conversations with people, you can't open like you feel that tension, about, there was a show that I saw and it was sort of commenting on political things and it was a musical. And I was trying to discuss it with my daughter, who's very liberal. We couldn't even get there. We couldn't, I was started to talk and it was like, no. And it wasn't even that, but what I find is that when things get politicized, it's a problem. Then you don't see the problem of each individual group struggling with whatever they're doing. July is called, what is it called? Disability. I just saw disability,
Disability awareness.
disability pride.
Oh, pride.
So every like problem that you can have has a color on a flag. To me, that is a politicization of disabled people. To kind of it's kind of limiting to make each one a stripe, to saying, well, people aren't heard. Let's hear what real people have to say, rather than this utter politicization of so many groups. So that once it becomes politicized, it's very hard to talk about it.
Right.
Well, that's true, because then it comes to be about winning or losing.
Yeah, we're a country that's big on that.
Right.
And not only for the winners, not the losers.
Right.
And sometimes loss is what brings growth.
Yeah.
Being able to cope with loss is so valuable, because life has all sorts of pitfalls and all sorts of things that we don't expect all the time. And yet, and we're all going to get old. If luck, hopefully we'll all get old. We are definitely all going to die. And we don't like to face that.
Well, choosing or falling into a particular kind of a political, sector, it's also a matter of belonging.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Goes back to the original question of individuality versus belonging.
Yeah.
And do we have to sacrifice something of ourselves to be?
Sometimes we do.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, so for example, when I first came to this country, well, not right in the beginning, but eventually, and I was in a particular kind of a community that was very clearly organized around sort of liberal democratic ideas, and so I kind of took it on as mine. But then, with time, maybe not quite needing that kind of an anchor, began to do my own reading and thinking and developing my own way of thinking about this that, probably puts me in some other kind of a group, but or not. But but yes, but it's, that's, speaking of community, I mean, that becomes a community also, a way to belong to a community.
So do we want to pull this together in the last 5 minutes? I mean, what are we talking about? What do we title this? Where do we go from here?
Well, I want to put in a plug for what we've talked about off and on in this session, which is, knowing ourselves, getting in touch with ourselves, looking inward, developing the ability to see our own selves before we try to see everybody else's self.
How about choosing a less safe harbor? I'm thinking marketing versus a long phrase.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
This would be good use for ChatGPT to say, listen to this whole conversation and tell us what's the clickbait summary of the conversation.
Oh my goodness, it's a little bit of a poison for ChatGPT.
That would be funny to do. Okay, Matt, you can do that. Be interesting to see what we come up with versus what our chatbot comes up with.
Make it explode.
Yeah, I mean, maybe along the lines of what Jack is saying, a less safe harbor, something around choosing complexity.
Mhm.
And open-mindedness.
Mm-hmm.
Writing some things down.
And in some ways, choosing a certain amount of discomfort.
Right. That's what we also call friction in terms of.
Right, yeah.
Well, I've noticed again in this conversation, and partly because I'm not in the conversation in video, only as a number today, because I couldn't make my video work.
But it works for us.
Oh, good. But what I've noticed is that when we do start to talk about things that might be topics on which we would be conflicted, have different views, we move toward looking at that conversation rather than diving in and picking up the gauntlet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like we need to have some level of enactment in order to have material to work with. I mean,
Mm-hmm. That's what brings it alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a musician before I became a therapist, and I think about this in the best way as chamber music. That we have different voices and we put them together, and sometimes there's dissonance, and sometimes we find our way through that to get to a deeper place.
or what's the conflict between sort of atonal string quartet and traditional, and what happens when those when the two cultures meet?
Right. Well, even with tonal music has, and atonal music is because of the fact that there's the tension between the atonality and the tonality and what it feels like to get into that and then resolve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And atonal music has resolutions too, has some kind of a system. That, interestingly enough, when I am working in some atonal music right now myself, and it's like there's a resistance to it because you don't want to practice it because it doesn't sound like it makes sense.
Yeah.
But you kind of stick with it, and then it really makes sense. And where a traditional piece of music you can learn more quickly, but not with the same sense of depth and mastery of it, the process of learning something that's atonal takes so long that by the time you get the notes, you really have it. So it's an interesting process of gathering information together.
Well, is that our metaphor? We're having an atonal conversation and we're learning to see the harmony in it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. These are metaphors that we can use to educate other people, children, how to listen to each other.
Mhm.
It seems like we've got so many ways that we can share what we know. And the analytic world, I don't know, I'd love to help them figure out why they're so defended against looking at the richness.
Well, actually, in my institute, we have instituted small group meetings, and I've had one, I have another one coming up this week, and it's been so wonderful. My group is meeting in person actually, and we are healing. So I want to thank you, Alice, for planting a seed that I have been able to use elsewhere to
Fabulous.
connect.
That's the other thing, plant seeds. Yep.
Beautiful.
Fabulous.
So, okay.
Okay.
All right.
So next time we will email and see where we go from here. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.